Good morning, Cindy Berkland here from cindyberkland.com. I have some fun stuff for us today. I'm interviewing David Coram. He is running for Clark County School District, and the reason I wanted to have him on the podcast today, I met him last week, and some of the things he had to say I piqued a lot of interest for me, and I know that for a lot of you that are concerned about your kids in school, you know, our kids are our future. And a lot of the stuff we're seeing in Nevada right now is really, really scary. So I brought David over, invited him to the podcast, and so I just wanted you to hear some really great things that David has to say. One thing I'm going to say about all this, for a lot of you that know I'm very politically active, and I'm just looking for the best person for the job, and then I promote those people that I feel like we really, really need. And as a very concerned parent, I do have a child in the Clark County School District. And for a lot of you that are watching that you're not even local to Nevada, you have your own concerns. And so this is going to be really today to promote awareness for what is going on in your school district. But, you know, I'm sure David will share, we are dead last in the United States of America. We're in 50th place for education. And that is a super concern. And what David had to say really was powerful. So I want to just ask you a couple of questions. Sure. David, you know, what I noticed about you is there's a lot of people running for school board, and we had this conversation, but not everybody's qualified. They're just so mad. They're just wanting to make a change, whatever it looks like. But tell us why you feel like you're qualified for the job.
That's a good question. A lot of people, if you look at their websites, and I usually do that coming from a law enforcement background, I want to see who I'm up against, and it's smart business-wise too, see who you're up against in the world running for a position like this, especially when there's 10 people.
Right.
So when I went comparing my resume with these other candidates' resumes, I noticed that, one, some of them didn't even have a college education. Two, they may have had children in the school, but they had no business background. Three, they had a full-time job working somewhere or doing something on top of what they were going to be doing as a trustee. So they really didn't have the time, they didn't have the education, and they didn't have the background and experience to be in this position. And you can see the results for the last 8-10 years where Clark County has fallen 20 years ago from the top 10 school districts in the country now to like 50th. So that in and of itself got me inspired. I think I've been on a mission. You know, if you're a Christian or not, I am a Christian. Yeah. God inspired me. I don't really want the job per se, but I think I've been prodded in the backside for about 10 years now. Dave, I'm getting you ready for this. I'm getting you ready for this. So that's kind of why I'm running for the position. Nobody has the quality or the background to do it. You can look at the trustees on the board. They're similar as to the trustee I'm trying to replace, Danielle Ford. So they all have the same background, and they don't have the education background and experience to change anything in the school district.
Well, and I believe really, really strongly, I say this a lot, Christians are mandated by God to keep evil at bay. And I really believe there's a lot of evil at work in our school system right now with CRT, that being shoved down our throats, critical race theory, and then also with the sex education starting in the kindergarten. You know, we're hearing stuff all over the country. And what are we going to be doing here in Nevada? Like, what business does a kindergartner need learning about sex education when we're falling short on reading, writing, and arithmetic? I mean, it's ridiculous what our kids aren't learning, and then this is what they want to tuck in. What's your view on this? What's your stand?
Well, you know, again, I'm a history buff too, so I went back and looked at what started education in the United States of America. When we broke away from England back in the Revolutionary War. Schools were started by parents. Small communities built schools, they ran schools, they created the curriculum. And I believe that's what America needs to bring back today. Yeah. Over the last 30 or 40 years, the parents have kind of separated themselves from education. Our schools feed the kids. They psychologically, provide services for our kids. Now they want to bring in sex education, inappropriate sex education into our schools. I believe that all belongs to the parents. I believe in the core curriculum, math, science, English, history, all those types of things. Those are the important subjects that should be taught. And as you move into middle school, then we have always had health. You remember if you
Yep.
know what nutrition, what to eat, not to eat, exercise. They teach a little bit about your anatomy as far as body parts and how stuff works and that type of thing. But there is nothing that's like CRT. There's nothing that's really sexual education about gender or anything like that. It's just health. So I think that's what we need to go back and focus on. I also believe that the curriculum needs to be approved by the parents and the kids
Absolutely.
in the all school districts throughout the country. I think we've lost that. The parents, me included, have been somewhat lacking in showing what we want in our schools. Now that we're starting to see some of these things pop in, you see all these parents throughout the country jumping into the school board meetings, and they're mad and they're upset. Well, we need to take it back and say, where did America come from in education, and go back to what it was.
Right.
There's also the government's looking at moving funds from directly into the school district, directly to the principals. So you're going to have that issue too coming up real soon. I think it's AB 469 here in Nevada that talks about that.
Well, and I feel like with the way we've done it now, we've gotten really far away from the principals even being able to dictate what happens in their schools. It's all approved by a board. Like, there's so many layers of chiefs, and we don't have enough Indians
Right.
to really the people that are really doing what needs to be done their hands are tied. So a lot of this is coming from the top, but it seems like such a mess. How do you even get in and fix what's going on internally with the school board? What's your plan there? It's just so messy.
It goes again to all the things that are happening in our society politically I hate to say it, but on the left, coming from the left side, when they're talking about, justice for our kids and so forth like that. Everybody deserves a third, fourth, fifth, 20th chance, restorative justice and things like that. At a certain age, you're going to have restorative justice. If you remember back in elementary school, when I've done it, out on the playground, and you hit the girl next to you for whatever reason, and she hits you back, and then the teacher pulls you aside, and you say sorry to them, and say sorry to them. So at a certain age, that does work. But once you start getting into middle school and high school, somebody that has just been battered or beaten at the high school level, you can't really do restorative justice there. Mm-hmm. It just is not going to work. But going back to the education, we need to go back to the roots. Clark County has a problem.
Okay.
So I only can teach certain subjects that are business related and so forth. I have multiple credentials in California and Nevada. So I could have taught a lot of different subjects in career technical education. But it took a while for something to open up and then finally get a job. Well, last year, I guess that actually was the December before, I finally got a job offer around the 16th of December. By the time I got hired, March 1st, I had already missed 2.5 months of education. And at that point, I believe the sub that was in there told me the teacher that was running that class left about 2 months before they even offered me the job. So for about 4.5 months, the literature, the classes I taught, video production at the high school and journalism at the high school, for four months, those 6 classes had a substitute teacher. So half or more of the school years has a substitute teacher that's not even credentialed in that curriculum, teaching that material. They're not going to be there full time. They don't know when they're going to actually move from one classroom to the next classroom. So that's an issue. You can't teach kids anything, if there's no teacher that's in the classroom regularly.
And here you were totally qualified for the job, and it took them 6 months to hire you.
Right.
Yeah. It's an interesting state of affairs. Common sense just seems to be gone. Talk to me about budgeting, because here's my thing. I think a lot of those teachers, if paid properly, they're required to keep going back to school and getting more degrees, but I don't think that's really helping the situation. What is a higher level degree for someone who's a kindergarten teacher? I mean, come on. They keep forcing them to keep going back and back to school. They're not paying them as much. What do you think you could do as a school board trustee for something like that?
Right. We need to, again, going back to when I got hired last year, even with 14 years as a teacher in education, they started me at the lowest rate for the district. And I had two bachelor's degrees, one in business management, one in human resource management, and a master's degree in education. I was teaching for about 14 years, and yet I'm starting at $41,000 a year. They just started this this incentive to bring teachers over, a signing bonus from if you live more than 100 miles away from the district. They'll pay you $4,000 to move to Las Vegas and teach in the district. That's not going to work. I came from California. There's no way in the world I would move from California for $4,000 to come over here.
Right.
So that's kind of silly. As I looked at the scale, the teacher scale I looked at last couple days, about a week ago or so, I noticed that it's gone up from 41 to about 43,000. But if you look at California, if you look at other states surrounding us, if that's our draw for teachers, if you want to be in the ballpark in the game to get teachers to move and come here, then you need to pay them a comparable salary, a starting salary. Right. So I looked at it and I thought, well, step one needs to disappear, because if you get rid of step one, which is the lowest scale, step two takes us just about to where the bottom scale is for the surrounding states around us. So if you even that playing field, you're going to bring more teachers here. Then that recruiting bonus is going to be a second incentive to actually draw more people, because, okay, well, now I can move there and they're going to pay me and they have a lot of openings. So that kind of makes sense for that aspect of bringing teachers to Las Vegas and putting them in our school districts.
Yeah, and then, I just feel like there's so much being paid out at the top. And then by the time we get down to the people that are really doing the work and teaching our kids, it's just not getting where it needs to be.
Sure.
I feel like there's just so much fluff at the top.
Right. And I haven't looked at all the salaries across the board for a bus driver. I don't know what the police are making. I don't know what a principal and so forth is making. I just looked at the teachers' rates and compared it, because that's where our weakness is right now. But coming from a financial background, I've run casinos in Indian gaming casinos in California and up in Oregon. And I've owned a couple of my own businesses. I have a video production business. I just passed you a card too here in town. So I've run my own businesses. I know that finances is important. I hate paying tax. I don't know who loves to give their money away and pay tax, but if I'm paying the tax, I want to make sure that money is being spent appropriately.
Correct.
And not being wasted. So that's one of my goals too, is to go from the very bottom of every high school, every district office where it's HR or the police department, look at how everything is being paid. I know the board gets a sheet showing the big numbers, but they don't drill down and see what actually is being spent at the lower part. The district probably does that, but it's not shared with the public. It's not shared, that I saw, with the trustees. So I want to go look and see what those are. I want to see what they're actually spending in these areas. There's some stuff that's mandated that we really don't have direction to by the state and so forth for special education and other programs. So those funds, you really can't do anything. Those things will have to be done at the state level, which I'm not opposed to calling the governor or some senator or congressman either and having a discussion with them.
Sure.
And I think that's important. I don't think we're doing that in the district right now.
Well, and I'll tell you, I pulled my kids out of public school. My daughter was in grade school and my son was in junior high. And here I was probably paying $3,000-$4,000 a year in property tax on my house. And I was so frustrated with the fact that money that I spend for public school, it comes out of my house payments and all, that's how it's paid. I don't have any say-so about my kids' education.
Right.
That's just what was happening. Like, I found out way too late that my son couldn't read or write cursive. Then I find out way too late that they pulled it out of school. I didn't know this.
Right.
So I literally put them in private school. And as a single mom, having both of them in private school, it was so much money for me to do that. But I was like, look, my kids need an education. And literally when we transitioned from public school to private, my kids were so behind when we tested. I had to move my son back a year when we started at the private school. It was horrifying to learn that they were so far behind. They couldn't. Private school is like a regular school. It's how our schools were when we were growing up, you know. And I literally had to move him back a grade. And then here I was paying so much money for both of them to be in school. But here's what I loved about it. I pulled them out of private or public school, so they were getting out of school at like 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They weren't starting until almost 9. So when we got into private school, they were starting right at 8, and they didn't get out until 3 o'clock. They had 8 classes a day. Music was not an elective. Art was not an elective. Bible was not an elective. And then they had a whole history class and math class and, writing. I'm like, oh my God, this is how it's supposed to be.
Right.
And they were by just going an extra hour and a half a day. I did the math, and they were literally going to school. And you know how CCSD in February, President's Month, February, they hardly even go to school. So I figured it out. They were literally going to school 45 days more a year based on the time that they were not in school, that they were in school.
Right.
And I'm like, now we're getting an education.
Right.
But here I am using my tax dollars to fund a school, the Clark County School District, and getting nothing for it.
Sure. And that's the way taxes were set up. Housing is set up that way all over the country, for the most part. Your property taxes go to education. Unfortunately, that's not the case in Nevada anymore, and neither is the money that's supposed to come from the marijuana, the legalization of marijuana. That's all going into the general fund. And then the governor and or the school board of education and or the Senate and the congressman decide what the funding is going to be, for the funding formula for each student is going to be at the school district level. So we need to, that's a political question. If I was as a trustee that I would look at that and investigate it and say, this is, what's happening in other states, and this makes more sense. Let's go back to this. But so we would know every year how much money we're going to get. With all the building and construction here in Las Vegas, there should be plenty of tax money coming from tax revenue on the houses to pay for education. So there shouldn't have to be money coming from marijuana. There shouldn't have to be money coming from the casinos. There shouldn't have to be money coming from anywhere else. So it's a decision we need to take back to the state level, to the elected officials there, and say we need to put it back to the way it was.
Well, and I used to go and support when my kids were in private or public school. The teachers were just so overwhelmed. They didn't have enough help. They had way too many kids and not enough help. And so I would go in and help in the classroom. And I can tell you, the copier machines they used were always broken. They didn't have textbooks. We had to make copies. So I was like a full-time assistant on my days off to help at school. And they were always asking us to bring in school supplies and pencils and like Kleenexes and just so much stuff that should be provided. It was really horrifying to see how these schools and these teachers just get in there and make it happen. Like, I'm so proud of most of our teachers that we have. They're really dealing with rough stuff, and they're making it happen no matter what.
Sure.
They are in it for the love of it.
I've lived that. I taught a couple courses back in California, which were construction type courses. I was told by my principal I have $2.46 a student or something for the whole school year. that a piece of plywood costs more than $2.46, and maybe a 2x4 I could buy, but that was it. So a lot of the materials I had to scrape up from here, there, anywhere, construction sites or whatever.
Wow.
And then also spend my own money to buy some of the materials to teach my kids in my schools. So I live that. Yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah. We also need to make sure that the kids are prepared coming from home. We need to get a partnership with our parents. I'd like to sit down and have monthly meetings, whether it's at the public library in my district or someplace else, and meet with the parents on a monthly basis. I want to get to know who they are, because it's not my seat. I'm not sitting in this because I'm Dave Coram, trustee of Clark County School District. I'm David Coram, representing the parents of my community, trying to get things done, because what's been done for the last 10, 15 years doesn't work.
Correct. Well, I just really appreciate you taking the time out. I feel like these needs are so great, and we need to talk about them, and we need to understand who we go to the polls and vote for. A lot of people don't take up until lately, nobody took the primary seriously, but I think that we're starting to understand now. We're starting to wake up to the fact that never at such a time as this is it really important to have a good governor. Is it really important to have somebody running our schools like Clark County School District? So I would really say to you guys as listeners, please pay attention to who's running in your school district. Find out what they stand for, because our kids are at risk if we don't. So I just want to say thank you. If this conversation interests you, if you have anything you'd like to add or any questions for David, please reach me at cindyberkland.com. David, do you want to mention your website as well?
Sure, yeah. Real simple. David, D-A-V-I-D, .coram, C-O-R-A-M, at, that's it, David.coram. Or, sorry, let me say it again. It's davidcoram.com is my website. David, D-A-V-I-D-C-O-R-A-M.com.
Awesome. So make sure you get educated on who's going to be running our school systems. Have an awesome day, guys.